What's going on, guys? Welcome to this video. So this is the Q&A, the answers. So I'm gonna start with first, thank you obviously for commenting and asking questions. You're giving me content to work with here, and also I give you in my opinion the best answers that I can give you, and potentially, hopefully, that will help you towards improving your bodybuilding journey. So I'm gonna start with the questions that are maybe the shortest ones. So I'm gonna start with the question of Mandy Lane Hardcore, and the question was, how do you get more defined muscles at the age of 30? So I guess this question could actually have many answers, because the age touches a lot of points. When people talk about I'm 30 years old, how should I approach the gym? Obviously there are many answers to that, in terms of believing it's possible and what kind of training to do for this age, etc. So in my opinion, the principles are overall really the same for when you are 30 or like 20, in a sense that the principles, the methods, the training methods are the same if you want to build muscle. The only thing that could potentially change when you're 30 is that, obviously you can't deny that you're getting older. I don't think it's old enough to start really talking about the fact that you really have to be more careful, but you do have to an extent to be more careful with your joints, etc. And so exercise selection can be more important as you age. And so it's true that once you get to 30 and more, you can recover perhaps not as well as when you're 20. That makes sense. And you have to be more careful with your joints, and that's why people start hurting more as they age, and they have to adapt their exercise selection. So that's why an intelligent program, a smart program, is always very important to have. And obviously the older you get, the truer it gets, because you don't have a choice anymore. When you're 20, etc., you can get away with mistakes, but when you get older, you can't really get away with mistakes. So obviously the answer to building muscle when you're 30, here the question is define muscle, which obviously define could be more linked to dieting, but I'll talk about training still. The principles are the same, but you want to be as intelligent as you can with your training, to adapt your training according to your lifestyle. I think it's very important as well. When you're 30, it's not like when you're 20. When you're 20, you usually have more time to gym, etc. When you're 30, you might have a family. And all other priorities basically that obviously might slow down a little bit your bodybuilding journey, and that will be different from when you're 20 and have maybe 2 more sessions a week than you can do when you're 30. So generally I can give you obviously an answer that the principles are the same as when you're young. You want to start your sessions, for example, with strength work and then go towards hypertrophy. But as well, this is very individual, and so your training obviously has to adapt according to you and you only. So there are general advice that will apply for most people, but also individual. And here, this is your lifestyle that I don't know about. That obviously you have to adapt your program around this. Regarding defining the muscle, obviously the dieting also has the same general principles that you want to follow. It's obviously training enough to keep the muscle or build muscle, and at the same time or after to diet down and to do it the proper way with a small calorie deficit over time, and to obviously be patient with it and see the muscle getting defined. There is no difference there. As you age as well, it's harder to lose fat, and that's true that the more consistent you are in the gym, and the less excess you make when eating, the better you will be off. Because one thing that can be pretty dangerous, I guess, dangerous, not optimal, is to do the yo-yo and basically eat too much, put too much weight. And the problem is that obviously these fat cells that you create, once you lose the fat, they don't die, they get empty. And after, when you're eating some food, it's easier for them to fill up again. So that's an issue. Basically you'd never want to make excesses and put on too many kgs, because these fat cells that you create never really disappear, and afterwards it's easier for you to gain fat again. So you know, as you age, it's harder to lose fat, and so you really don't want really to put on fat, and you want to be really consistent, I guess, with the training. You don't have to be extreme, but consistency, obviously, to not add, you know, the fat on your body is gonna be very helpful. And it's true that when you're getting older, probably the worst thing that you can do is to stop for like 4 or 5 months, because you know you will probably put, you know, some fat during this pause, and getting back to it is harder. It's not as easy as when you're 20 to diet down, etc. And so what you don't want to do is basically do long pauses where you know, you might have excesses, etc. that will be very hard to lose afterwards. So in my opinion, the people that we see that are like 50 or 55 and that are really ripped still never really stopped. They always kept going. They never stopped. Once they stop, it's very hard to get back into it, and this is true as you age. So I would say that you have to be consistent and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't be extreme, but at least be there a little bit every day or every 2 days. As long as you're consistent with your training, you should be fine. As well, talking about 30 years old plus people, one thing that is for sure is that you will build muscle, and there is definitely no excuse not to build muscle. I think, you know, it's not because someone is 30 that there is definitely no possibilities to build muscle. I've seen it, you know, many times, people over 30 who actually put a lot of muscle. And we have, I mean, one of the best examples in the fitness industry. Well, Geoffrey Schofield obviously has always been into a lot of sports to a pretty high level. But, you know, bodybuilding, it's probably been, you know, 7 or 8 years, but he started pretty late. And if you look at the past 2 years, that's probably where he made the most gains. Like, his progress has been incredible, and he's over 30. And so he's natural, and you can see this physique above 30. So he's the great example that there is definitely no excuse not to have a great physique above 30. And that's not because someone started at 30 that there will be any issues. So obviously my answer was a bit longer than, you know, the question that was just asked about defined muscles. But I think it was important to cover the whole 30 thing and, you know, the questions that could come up with it. So obviously there are probably a lot more things to say about the topic, but you know, obviously I don't want to make it too long either for the other questions. So I'm gonna stop here, and if there is anything that didn't make sense or need more clarification, then I'll be happy to answer in the comments. Now I want to answer Balint Lawson C. So I'm probably pronouncing that name stupidly wrong, but you will probably recognize yourself, I hope. From what I could understand, it's about changing the rep ranges. How often basically should the rep ranges change for better gains? And the variable, yeah, is rep range mainly, so I guess the variable could also be something else. But here it seems to be targeted, well, your question towards the rep ranges. So in my opinion, like pretty much everything in bodybuilding, I think, you know, consistency and frequency is kind of the key to keep improving. So I think that consistency is also something true within the program. So basically, obviously, people say in bodybuilding you have to be consistent, and to me, within bodybuilding, you also have to be consistent with what you're doing. And so I'm not really for the change. I'm only for the change if obviously the program is not good. But once things are optimized and that the program is good for the person, I think that changes shouldn't be made, because obviously a program is optimal for the person. Everyone is unique, and so there is a certain exercise selection according to the person, etc. And so once you have the good ones, I mean, you can't really change a lot of things. You can change sometimes if, you know, you have issues coming up. That could be injuries, or that could just be other factors like, you know, motivation, and you just don't like what you're doing anymore. But, you know, usually you like what you're doing anyway when it works. And a program that is well optimized, usually with the right exercise selection, is what is good for you. And when that's good for you, you don't need to change it. And I think that for the reps, the principles are pretty much the same. You shouldn't really change much, because there aren't many things that you can do anyway. The most normal in the industry is obviously as a bodybuilder is to mix low reps, which will translate pretty much to heavy weight, and high reps with what will translate to basically you lifting some lighter weight to get the hypertrophy in. So I think strength work plus hypertrophy work is usually what's best for a bodybuilder. The strength work is interesting because over the long term, I believe, practicing strength work make you stronger quicker. And so, that translates then to your hypertrophy movement that you practice. And that if you only stick to high rep movements, you will still improve, obviously. But I do think that, strength work helps progressing faster. And then there's simply different ways where you can do that. Some people, they like, for example, to start, their session with strength work and finish with hypertrophy with isolation movements. Some other people, they will do strength for 1 week and then the other week they will do only hypertrophy work. So with the same movement, but just higher reps. Some people, for example, they will, for each of their exercise, do some strength work and they will do a top set that is more oriented for hypertrophy, so higher reps. So people really do it differently. My opinion is that mixing strength work and hypertrophy work within the same session is the best. It brings that frequency, very often. Or what you can do is, within the sessions, do one session where like it's purely oriented strength and another one hypertrophy. But doing, for example, 2 weeks of hypertrophy, 2 weeks of strength, I don't think is the best. The frequency of like the strength work and the hypertrophy, you leave too much time basically in between these two. I think it's better when they're together. And obviously the very classic is to do strength work with compound movements and to do higher rep ranges with isolation movement. I do like the idea also of going pretty heavy on isolation movement. I think you can make a lot of gains doing this. So I think you should think about this as well. As you get more intermediate or advanced, depending on your level. But, I do believe that obviously the normal scheme of doing strength work and then hypertrophy work within the same session is pretty good. And then the variables, obviously, of this, it could be from 6 reps to, 20 reps. On your compounds, you could, evolve between 6 and 10 reps. And then for your higher rep isolation movements, you could definitely go from like 10 to 20 reps. The most important is obviously to track what you do and to improve over time. So basically, if there is one thing to remember from what I'm saying is that I think you should just stick simply to the same rep ranges once you've chosen which one you want to work with, and stick to pretty normal schemes. And the more consistent you're going to be with the rep ranges you use, the better it's going to be, because you're going to be able to track basically your progress. If you keep changing the variables, unfortunately, you might get a bit lost. I mean, as long as you have the same exercise that are good for you, you should still be able to see the progress, even if you change the variables of the rep ranges. But, once something works, and that it's proven, the basics work, etc., I don't really see a point of like changing the variables too much. So I would advise you to simply stick to, what fundamentally is pretty good. Start with the strength work, finish with more hypertrophy work on the isolation movements, and go from 5 reps, to 20 plus, and track all of this, obviously. And to answer the protein intake that I have, if I'm bulking, I don't really count. I think protein is a bit overrated in the sense like it's never taken me away from making a lot of gains. Although if I try to hit the right amount of protein, I will eat around 1.5 gram of protein per kg, body weight. So if, for example, I'm 90 kg, I'll try to eat something like 150 grams of protein. On a cut, I'll even push to like 2 grams of protein per kg of body weight. So meaning that if I'm, for example, 90 kg, I'll eat 180 grams of protein. I'd recommend sticking like, the the fundamentals are like between 1.2 grams of protein to like 2 grams of protein per kg of body weight. It's not as important in my opinion as most people say. Protein, like it's been a lot used for marketing in the industry, and so I'm not a big advocate of it, but I still think it's important obviously to hit the macros if you can do it. So around 1.5 grams of protein per kg of body weight will be fine enough. Now I'll answer the question of Sean Barker, the question about the arms. So the answer is gonna be pretty short. It's pretty straightforward as well. I've made a great video about it, which really explains for beginner, intermediate, and advanced what type of workout to do for the arms, and when should you step up basically in terms of volume, etc., depending on the level. So obviously here the arms, the volume depends usually on the level. I think that 2 exercises per muscle is enough after chest, for example, for the triceps, and after back, for example, for the biceps. Especially as a beginner, you don't particularly need an arm day. I think that training your biceps after they're well warmed up, for example after back, or triceps after the chest, is good enough. And obviously because it's only 2 or 3 sets to start with, 2 exercises, and maybe let's say 6 to 8 sets a week per muscle, it's not much and it doesn't need a full session basically. So I think 6 to 8 sets a week for 6 sets for example for biceps and 6 sets for triceps is totally enough for a beginner. No need to train it twice a week as well. You'll be targeting it, for example, your triceps if you do chest twice a week already, or maybe back. And I think you gotta take things slowly as a beginner. Otherwise, if it's for someone that is intermediate, I think that 10 to 15 sets per session is good enough. So for example, for both muscles, so for example 8 sets for biceps and 8 sets for triceps should totally be enough as an intermediate. You can start doing arm days if you want to actually start giving the priority to the arms if you really want them to grow. But again, these are just average numbers, and this could be more or less according to one's lifestyle basically. And I think as an advanced person, someone can definitely do 10 or 15 sets per muscle, which would be maybe 3 exercises per muscle, and even up to twice a week, to have a good enough frequency at an advanced level. I think that having an arm day and maybe not 2 arm days but 1 arm day, and maybe when you do your back or your chest, again doing some triceps and some biceps to train them again, to add some frequency to it on very basic but good fundamental exercises can be interesting. And so that would be the volume basically that I think is pretty good. Otherwise, I think that the pump volume is basically just hypertrophy work that needs to be tracked still. That I would not really obviously define as pump, but rather just a higher rep isolation movements perhaps that needs to be tracked, and obviously the weight will be then a bit lower. If you can do higher reps, obviously the weight will be a bit lower than when you do the heavier sets, and it will be obviously interesting as well. And I would do it indeed more at the end of the session rather than at the start, where you really want to enjoy the first basic exercise that are important and really hit it with the so-called strength work, where you kind of enjoy the 6 to 10 rep ranges. So that's my advice for arms. But for those who want to see, there is a great video that I made about how to grow massive arms. There may be 2 of them where I explain how I grew my arms as well up to 18 inches. I would advise people to watch this video if they want to. So now I'm gonna get to the last questions. So that's one person, but many questions here, providing me with quite a lot to work with, which is great for the people that will watch this video if they have the same questions. So I'm gonna answer obviously by first by the 5th question, which was the most important. I'm gonna put more time into this one than the other questions, and I try to basically have the best answer for this fifth question in particular, because this is the most important apparently to you. And I do share the opinion that obviously it's a pretty important topic, or at least can be relatable to a lot of people. I want to comment first as well the text under the questions. I think that I don't really have much to say apart from the fact that I think it's good management of programming, just adapting to your life, adapting to your lifestyle, what you could do. You've just been, managing and budgeting, your energy very well around what you can do or not do. Working out the weekends for heavier stuff is very smart because obviously you have more rest. All what you said, basically, in my opinion, makes sense, and so I don't really have anything else to say. And I think that, like you mentioned, you're more consistent and you're making better gains thanks to these adjustments. And well done for obviously being able to keep up with it for 15 months after going through this 3-4 months period where you stopped and then you restart, which can be pretty annoying. But I'm going to answer this in a second. How personally I would see consistency working for myself and for other people. So regarding the fifth question, can you share your tips to stay consistent in the gym? Because consistency is the most important thing if you want to achieve a nice physique. I think this is a really important topic you mentioned. So if I talk about myself, I was very motivated from the start, and this motivation came from a meaning. I had meaning to go training. Whether this meaning was right, wrong, I had meaning. So some meaning, what's the meaning behind going to the gym? People who usually are motivated from the start and are going to the gym have something in mind. They have meaning behind lifting, and this is different from people. Me, I just always loved bodybuilding, the way it looks. I was always impressed by the actors that I would see in the movies, and I just thought, this looks sick. I didn't particularly think, that would, for example, bring the girls or anything like this. I thought it would, but it wasn't all my focus, basically. I loved bodybuilding even before I started thinking, for example, about girls. And so afterwards, that's why I said the motivation can be good or bad or wrong or right. I don't think, having a very nice body really helps with girls, for example. It can help to an extent, but I don't think this is the core thing that is important. And so people have different motivations. I think that obviously knowing exactly why you go to the gym, what it brings to your life, is one of the most important things, because once you have meaning behind lifting, then you have the will to go there, usually over the long term, because you have a reason to go there. That reason can get hard when it's based usually on external validation or these kind of things, but that can be powerful enough to actually bring you for a long time to the gym. But the best thing that will really make you last on the long term going to the gym is usually because you really love it and it brings something great to your life. So both wrong and right motivation factors can be good, and can the wrong ones can probably make you go to the gym for a long time. Even to be pretty extreme at the gym if that there is something, a wrong factor that is still very important to you and really pushes you to do that. But in my opinion, for the very long term, at some point, finding a meaning behind lifting that is healthy and that actually makes a lot of sense to you is the most important. And I think a lot of people will keep going to the gym because of that. It brings them stability. It brings them something in their life that they really do enjoy. And if they're like me, they just, since they were 10 years old, they were fan of bodybuilding and, just thinking it looks awesome, then they will always be motivated to go there. They just like it, Me, I've always had this motivation because I've always been impressed and fascinated by how it can look, etc. So for people who might not have, this motivation from the start, I think rethinking the meaning of going to the gym is pretty important. Otherwise, as you said, even in your message, you know, as in fitness, you must stay consistent. Well, you know, on YouTube, for example, well, this is true. And here, I believe that, you know, consistency will come from the fact also that you get results. Because if you're consistent but you never get results, this consistency will die. And so, you know, I talked about obviously the first part of answering this question, that I think obviously you have to have meaning behind lifting. But I do believe as well that you do want to get results, and this usually straight from the start. I think a lot of people give up on bodybuilding because they don't have results, because they don't train the proper way. And usually when someone gets results at something, he's hooked with it, and people don't stop. They just like it because each time they go to the gym, they're excited because they're gonna get a new PR, for example. And so I think consistency, obviously someone can build the habit of doing something little by little and getting into the habit of, you know, going there, and so it becomes easier to go. But this will die at some point if the consistency that you build is not fulfilled by results. And I do think that the most important for someone to stay consistent is actually to know how to train so they can get results and actually enjoy what they're doing. And, you know, because they have results, it also fulfills this meaning that they have behind lifting that I was talking at the start. So I do think obviously that knowing how to train from the start, getting results from the start, doing the best you can from the start is the best thing that someone can do to stay consistent. I also talked about this in a video where I was saying exciting routines are boring and boring exciting routines are exciting. I was talking basically about the fitness industry and how they try to sell these exciting things, these exciting programs, gimmicky programs which don't bring results. And so this program ended up being boring because people stop seeing the gimmicks don't work. But the boring routine that is, you know, following the basics is actually exciting because it brings you results. And I think, you know, this video could be of an interest for you. Perhaps, you know, you should probably watch it. In this video, I'm also talking about the fact that to make, you know, bodybuilding more interesting, and that comes back pretty much to the meaning I was talking about. That's also simply, most people go to the gym and they want to get bigger overall, but they forget that they actually have so many options. They can actually develop the physique that they like themselves, you know. Myself, I talked about a video about forearms. I love forearm muscle, and I would see my physique with very sick, you know, nice forearms, and that makes me, you know, very excited to go train, rather than just like going to train to get bigger overall. I think that specializing your physique into what you want it to look like. Even maybe you have some, you know, superhero that you watch when you're younger, etc., and you like the structure of their physique. Like actually starting to really, you know, have some dream physique basically, or things that inspire you, can be very interesting and make the sessions much more meaningful, and, you know, giving you this motivation, this meaning to go to the gym and actually fulfill what you want the most. So I think, you know, rethinking all these things can be very interesting to be consistent at the gym. So I hope the fifth question was pretty well answered. I'm gonna go through the 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we'll have it done for this video. So in the 1, you asked, in your experience, how much percentage loss in working weights is normal when you try to change body fat from 20% to 10% as an intermediate lifter? In the ideal case, if you want to protect muscle, you should be working with the same weight, but in reality, you can't avoid strength loss. That's true that, you know, you should try to keep the same weight. Anyway, you seem to know your stuff, so, you know, that I can just agree with this. But that in reality, yeah, like you will usually lose strength, obviously, as a result, unless you're maybe a real beginner and you have the chance to basically put on muscle and lose fat at the same time. But as an intermediate lifter, it starts to be very hard to do this. But I don't want you to see this as a loss, because if you're doing your best, there is no regret to have, and there is no such thing as a loss. You just try to maintain your weight load, the weights that you lift as much as possible, and you're just losing the fat and optimizing as much as you can your strengths. And so if you do your cut well, patiently, the next time you do your bulk and you compare the peak bulks of the two different periods, you will realize how much stronger and how much strength you will have gained. And that's the same if you compare each cut that you do. If you're much stronger on the next cut that you were in the last one, then that's not a loss. That's just the way it is. But that's normal. But that's where patience is important, because there is one thing though that I'll say, that if you don't do the things as best as you can, then that's where that can be an issue. If you lose the weight from 20% to 10% body fat way too fast, then yes, you can lose strength that you weren't supposed to lose, and that's an issue there. So usually when you go from 20% to 10% body fat, this will take around 4 months to 5 months if you really want to do things slowly and take your time. So obviously as well, I wouldn't go on an extreme diet cut. I heard this as well from Alpha Destiny, which was very interesting, saying that obviously I've experienced it myself, very extreme cut when you do 3 months being very strict. After, you just want to eat as much food as you want, and I think a better cut for 4 months or 5 months rather than 3 months, and actually eat sometime the food that I like, so it's not too extreme, and so I don't make excess at some point, some excess. So I think that as well, we talked about consistency and not stopping after a while. I think that here it's very important, obviously, to be slow on the cut and actually enjoy yourself sometimes, so you don't end up completely going mad and nuts and actually eat so much food, or because you've been too extreme, you actually stop the gym because you're fed up of it. So take your time. That's the best I can say. So 4 or 5 months basically, I think, to lose from 20 to 10% body fat, or even a slightly bit more. And in the ideal case, I mean, if you take the time to do this, that the diet is well optimized, so you just have a very small calorie deficit and that all the macros are the right ones. I mean, as long as you do your best and you know that you're doing your best, you can't have any regrets, basically. I think that's, the most important. You do as much as you can on your nutrition, on your programming, and, the exercise, the training that you do. You're patient. You shouldn't see this as a loss. It's just the normal process. Now, if you lose, the 20% to 10% body fat in 2 months, then, you can start thinking, well, maybe I messed up there. But, if I you ask me how much percentage, well, I'll try to give you an example. When I was benching 160, I did a cut then, and I went from 105, 110 kg to 87, 86 kg, and my bench went from 160 to 127.5, 130 kg bench around. So I lost 30 kg on my bench, but again, if you ask me here, you will lose mostly on the compound movements, the strengths, and on isolation movements, you will feel less the loss of the strengths. So that's, what I can tell you, basically. So the second answer, the second question, favorite hypertrophy exercise per body part. Well, what I will be able to tell you here is that this is obviously unique to the person and to his body morphology, the exercise that he chooses for hypertrophy. For hypertrophy, I usually like isolation exercises because they're, in my opinion, for a specific muscle, the best. Compound movements are great for overall mass, they target many muscles, but here, because we're talking about per body part, I'm mainly gonna focus probably on hypertrophy exercises that I do enjoy. And again, hypertrophy exercises, there isn't a specific hypertrophy exercise. I guess it's the rep range also that really matters for the hypertrophy. I'm gonna give you my personal list, which might not be the same for you because you might not have the same body morphology. So favorite hypertrophy exercises. For shoulders, to me, it's lateral raises. I've just made a video. Well, the video is gonna come up like just after this one about lateral raises and why I enjoy them and how to work with lateral raises. For biceps, I will say incline curls, but again, you know, that could not particularly be for the short biceps people and people who have shoulders that are pretty, you know, sensible, because it stretches the shoulders quite a lot. And for the brachialis, I will say hammer preacher curls. I really like, you know, the preacher, but the hammer as well, like combined together, like you're really targeting the brachialis, and I really like that. Regarding back, I will say for the different angles, I like upright rows, where I bend a little bit over to really target the traps. Although some people don't really like it because it can be quite dangerous for the rotator cuff. I try to be careful with it, but I really like the sensations. I like seal rows because with a nice seal row bench, that can be very interesting actually. You don't cheat much and you can really target, you know, the upper back as well as the lower back, depending on where you are, where you want to target basically. And I really like pull-ups, a very basic exercise, I guess, but one of the best. For forearms, I will say wrist curls and wrist extensions. I know there are more exercises. I really like the wrist roller as well. I think it's a fun exercise. Maybe not the best, but I like it and it's scalable. But wrist curls and extensions are very basic, but they do the job for me, so I really like them. For the abs, I will say the crunch on the cables, because you can really scale up, and that's the position where you can really stretch the abs as you go up. Whether when you're on the floor, you know, the floor, the ground is basically limiting you. But when you do on cables like that, you know, with cables, you can really go up and really stretch all the abdominals, and you can scale as well. So I think the crunch on the cables are one of the best exercises you can do for abs. For legs, I like split squats. They're just a very hard exercise, and I think they, you know, depending on how far you put your foot at a distance from you, you can target, you know, more the quads or more the glutes, and you know, all the other muscles from the legs are really well involved, and I think they're hard exercise and I quite like them. They won't be as hard on my lower back as well as, you know, squats, because I'm a tall person and I don't really like squats. So, you know, I do usually leg presses, and I do, you know, split squats or things like this. So to me, Bulgarian split squats are one of the best exercises for hypertrophy for legs. But again, it's unique to me. For the calves, I really like calf raises on the Smith machine, doing it unilateral, because if you put, you know, your two calves, then you can put so much weight and it's very annoying to stack up the weight and take it off. So I like to unilateral because I only need to put 20 or 30 kg and that's enough. But you know, the stretch might not be as good on unilateral, but I still like it on the Smith machine. So for calves, I will say that. For chest, I will say flies. I think flies are great for me because I don't think I'm made for bench press, although I've always been bench pressing in the past, and we'll talk about it for the next question. That is asking basically my weak muscle group, which is the chest, I think, because I've been benching a lot, but bench was just not a great exercise for me, so the exercise selection wasn't right. So flies are great for me, I think, because I don't use my triceps as much and my shoulders, I don't use them as much, and so I can target the chest. So I will say flies. And for the triceps, I will say skull crushers, but skull crushers on an inclined bench, so I can really go behind my head and really go stretch the long portion of the triceps. You know, this is one of my favorite exercises for hypertrophy, for the long portion, and otherwise for the external portion of the triceps, I like to do close grip bench press with elbows open. I think that's, you know, if you're careful with it, you're really gonna target the external portion of the triceps, and that's just a very basic but nice exercise for, you know, the close grip bench press for triceps. So that answers the hypertrophy questions for the exercises. You can let me know as well which ones are that you like. So filming again, as I'm realizing and uploading the video, that I forgot to talk about the third question, which was about my favorite hypertrophy schemes. So again, it's gonna be very unique to me, although I do think there is general advice here that applies to all natural. So when I say it's unique to me, obviously I'm talking about my lifestyle and how I can adapt. You know, some people, although here we all natural, some people will be able to train 3 times a week, and some people who have more time, maybe 6 times. So that's why I think it's unique. But basically, one thing that I think all naturals should try and do is to have as much frequency as possible without it being too much volume, so that, you know, you can recover. And by high frequency, I mean, you know, enough working on the muscles during the week. So I think, you know, trying to target, you know, the muscles twice a week for each is the best thing that a natural can do, as long as he can recover for it. And obviously, if he can't do all the muscle twice, he has to prioritize the muscle that are the most important to him, that he will be able to train twice. I think that's really the thing about nice hypertrophy schemes, is to have basically a high frequency program with, you know, high intensity session and moderate to pretty low volume. It's not really low volume in the end, because if you look at it and you do actually train the muscle twice a week, in the end it's a pretty high volume. But I think it's better to have an approach where you train more frequently rather than do like a massive session where you only train once a week, because in the end it's not going to be enough for the muscle as a natural, and I think the high frequency is better. So in the end the volume is high, because if you combine the 2 sessions of the same training the same muscle twice a week, the volume is high. But if you split the sessions, obviously the volume is going to be less, and I prefer this approach than the very big volume session that you only do once a week. So that's why I'll say basically that the program is a high intensity. The best for natural, I think, is, you know, a high intensity where you give it your all in the session with a pretty low volume approach, because you're gonna train twice a week anyway, and a high frequency training basically. I think that this is probably the best thing that you can do as a natural, and the best hypertrophy, you know, progression scheme that you can do. Regarding the rep ranges of this, you know, hypertrophy, which kind of like comes back to the variables that we were talking about earlier for the other question. I think that obviously you want the each set that you do to be, you know, close to failure. And so I like the idea of, you know, natural hypertrophy, for example, when he talks about evolving rep ranges. I also like, you know, we're talking about progression schemes for hypertrophy. I think that the video he made differencing the bro split with the gentleman split was interesting, because it, you know, I like bro splits, but I think bro splits have become not bro splits like anymore. So at the start, the bro splits aren't a bad idea, but they're a bad idea because they're becoming something where you don't have enough frequency. So I think, you know, if you like a good complement, a good addition to what I'm saying, I think, you know, watching the natural hypertrophy channel where he talks about gentleman splits versus the bro split is gonna be interesting, because the gentleman split is indeed you know, the nice progression schemes for naturals. For hypertrophy. And so coming back to the evolving rep ranges that natural hypertrophy talks about, it says, for example, that it's better to work out in, you know, rep ranges rather than say I'm gonna do 4 times 8. It's better to say I'm gonna do from 12 to 8 reps. So like, you know, the first set could be 12, and the second could be 11, and the third could be 9, and the last could be 8. This way it's always gonna be hard basically, because if, for example, you were to do 4 times 8 at the same weight, you know, the first set is gonna be pretty easy, and the last one you might not get it. So working within rep ranges, evolving rep ranges is interesting. Although I will say that I did this in my own bodybuilding, is to actually not use the evolving rep ranges. So I would stick, for example, to 4 times 8 with the same weight, but you know, from the first set, it's hard already. And what I would do is to just take more rest to be able to get the next one. So, you know, that depends if you have time on your hand or not. So you can either use evolving rep ranges, you know, like from, you know, 12 to 8, for example, or you can simply stick to like a 4x8, where the first set is pretty hard, and to get the next ones, you just take a bit more rest in between. So all the sets are actually hard. So I think that pretty much covers, you know, the hypertrophy schemes that are good for natural bodybuilders, and you can feel free to watch other videos like the natural hypertrophy one to, you know, complete basically this answer. But I think, you know, the high frequency, pretty low volume, and high intensity type of workouts are the best for natural lifters and hypertrophy. Now I'm gonna answer the last question, which is the fourth question. Can you share your tips to stay consistent in the no. What was your weak muscle group and what you have done to improve it? So I think my weak muscle group mainly is chest. I have pretty long arms. I've got pretty wide shoulders, I guess. Well, not too wide, not too short, basically, but you know, I'm very strong on lateral raises and stuff like this. And my triceps are like, they grow like very easily, and on movements like bench press with long arms and big triceps and shoulders that are pretty decent, it's just not an exercise for me. But I didn't used to know that, and so I used to do a lot of benching, a lot of presses, and so I've just developed my triceps a lot rather than my chest, and I'm just not made for chest anyway at the start. So what I've done for that is just to rethink my exercise selection and do more flies, for example. And I will do also a lot of high rep stuff. So I will do my normal strength work and normal rep ranges work with the flies. But then at the end of the session or in between the sessions, I will do 100 of reps. So like sets of 100, for example, where I really don't take a lot of weight to not tire myself for the next sessions, but enough to get stimuli in my chest. And so I will do very high reps up to 100 with lateral raises, maybe with 4, 5, 6, and when I was, you know, at a higher level like 10 kg, and do sets of like 100 and really drive the blood inside the chest and get it responsive, you know, telling my body, well, this is not a responsive part, obviously, so I'm gonna get it very active very often. So I'm gonna be very consistent with high repping this muscle. High repping, which doesn't mean tiring this muscle particularly for the next sessions, because I take weight that is very light and that won't really impact my real chest sessions, but enough to really get the blood in it, to get them more responsive for the heavier sessions that I will do, and to tell my body, well, you know, if that's not a responsive part and a pretty weak part, I want it to become something that you understand is active and is gonna be responsive. So I'm gonna send signals to my chest very often with high reps, getting the blood in there, so you understand that this is a muscle that starts to be, you know, needs to start to be responsive, and that needs to be developed. It's basically, I guess, the natural way of being on steroid. Well, instead of injecting yourself, well, you do sets of 100 reps where you drive the blood into your muscle way more often than it's usually used to, and you try to basically make this weak part a more responsive part and a better part. So there is a bit of theory in that, but I do believe in this concept, and I think it really helped me, as well as doing my normal strength work, to really hammer as well, without tiring myself. Again, I repeat, with weight that is low enough, do very, very high rep sets with this exercise that is flies for my chest to grow. So yeah, that's what I can tell for the weak parts. That's what I've done. I would advise you to do this only if you really program in the right way, in a sense that you're not gonna tire yourself to be able to do this, and if you're starting to reach a level that is, yeah, intermediate plus / advanced. Otherwise, no need to do like the high rep stuff. Try to have the right exercise selection for your weak parts already and to feel them. You know, obviously the high rep stuff as well at 200 helps you feeling the muscle better for your heavier session. You build this muscle to be more responsive, but you as well learn how to feel them, because it's not a muscle that you naturally feel easily like the strong parts of your body. So I hope I really answered all the questions, guys. We were 3 in this video, but I hope it helps more people than just 3. And I hope that you can see that, you know, I'm invested in this video and trying to answer as best as I can. So, you know, we build this, you know, little channel slowly but surely, with a nice communication between me who make the videos and you who help me with my videos, providing questions for you, but also, you know, giving me content that I can work with, which I really appreciate. So thank you, guys. I didn't think that would be that long, but that's fine. I will see you maybe in 3 or 4 weeks if you enjoyed it, for a new Q&A. And if there are newcomers here, then don't hesitate to, you know, ask me questions, and you can see that you'll get pretty decent answers. So take care of yourself, guys. See you next time. And if I didn't answer all your questions, feel free to be in the thread and ask the questions there. I'll try to answer the rest there. Take care, guys.